The alien transport ship arrived at the interspecies sanctuary early in the morning, long before the place usually became busy. The guards at the front gate saw the glowing cargo container and knew something unusual was inside. The aliens who brought it looked uneasy, as if they wanted to leave the moment their task was done. They whispered among themselves, refusing to go anywhere near the heavy enclosure at the center of the platform. Inside that container was the creature they called an alien wolf. The aliens described it as a predator from a cold and distant world, a creature that could outrun storms and crush steel bars when frightened. But the moment the door was opened, the sanctuary staff saw something very different from the terrifying descriptions. The wolf was lying in the corner, its fur clumped together with dirt, dried mud, and strange parasitic growths that looked painful even from a distance. Its eyes were half closed, and its breathing was rough, as if each inhale scratched its lungs. Still, the aliens backed away, warning the humans not to touch it. They said the creature was unpredictable. They said it was infected with something they couldn't identify. They said it would attack anyone foolish enough to get too close. But the human zookeeper, a quiet man known for working with difficult animals, didn't turn away. He stood there, observing the wolf with calm eyes. He didn't see a monster. He didn't see a dangerous alien beast. He simply saw an animal in trouble, a living being that was hurting. The aliens shook their heads. They muttered that the human was reckless. A few even laughed softly, calling him foolish for believing he could handle something even they feared. They said humans were too soft-hearted, too emotional, and that emotions only got you hurt when dealing with creatures like this. But the human didn't respond to any of their comments. Instead, he knelt down a few steps away from the cage door and stayed completely still. The cold morning wind blew dust around him, lifting strands of the wolf's damaged fur. The wolf opened its eyes a little wider. It didn't growl. It didn't lunge. It simply stared at the human, confused, as if wondering why someone wasn't running away like everyone else. The human noticed something the aliens didn't. Fear. Not wild, dangerous fear, but exhausted fear. The kind that comes when an animal has been pushed to its limit for too long. He didn't move closer that day. He didn't try to touch it. He didn't bring tools or equipment. He just sat near the cage, letting the wolf see him, smell him, and understand that he was not a threat. This continued every day. He arrived early each morning, before the sanctuary fully woke. He sat beside the enclosure for hours, quietly speaking in a soft voice, not saying anything important, just letting the sound of his calm tone fill the air. Sometimes he read reports to it. Sometimes he just described the weather or what he saw around the sanctuary. He was not trying to impress anyone. He was only trying to ease the creature's fear. The aliens watched him from a distance, whispering among themselves. They assumed he was wasting time. They said the wolf was too sick to understand anything. They insisted that approaching such a creature was dangerous and pointless. But over the next few days, small changes began to appear. The wolf, once curled tightly in the corner, started lifting its head when the human arrived. It would shift its weight, trying to see him better. The creature's breathing seemed to slow whenever it heard his voice. And although its body still trembled from weakness, the trembling eased whenever he stayed nearby. The human noticed every small detail. He could tell the creature didn't fear him as much now. It wasn't ready for direct contact, not yet, but it wasn't shrinking away from him either. Other staff members began to whisper the same thing the aliens had, that the human was foolish. They said he was taking unnecessary risks. They said the wolf was unpredictable. Some even told him to stop visiting the enclosure altogether, but he didn't argue with them. He simply continued his quiet visits. He had worked with injured animals before. Not alien ones, but enough to know that fear could make even the gentlest creature act like a threat. and he could see in the wolf's tired eyes that beneath the pain there was no desire to attack, only a silent wish for relief. One afternoon, while he sat by the enclosure, a group of alien officials arrived to inspect the creature. They stood far back, pointing at the wolf as if it were a danger waiting to explode. They didn't look at its wounds. They didn't notice the heavy breathing or the way it pressed its side against the cold floor, because the pressure helped numb the pain. All they noticed was its species and their own fear of it. The human, however, leaned forward slightly, watching the wolf closely as it tried to shift positions and failed. The creature let out a soft sound, not a growl, but a weak cry of discomfort. It broke something inside him. Pain like that, constant, unspoken, ignored, was something he couldn't walk away from. The aliens didn't understand this. They kept their distance, warning him again that the wolf was too dangerous and that any attempt to approach it would end badly. But the human wasn't reckless. He wasn't careless. He never took a step without observing the creature's reactions. He moved slowly. He waited. He let the wolf decide the pace. Trust couldn't be forced. It could only be offered and accepted freely. One evening, while he was sitting beside the enclosure, the wolf raised its head and sniffed the air in his direction. Its eyes softened, and for the first time, it didn't look afraid, only curious. That tiny moment made all the patience worth it. The next morning when he arrived, the wolf tried to stand. Its legs trembled, and it managed only a few steps before collapsing again. But it had chosen to move closer to the side of the enclosure where he usually sat. It lowered its head, resting it against the ground nearest to him. When the aliens saw this, they were stunned. Some whispered that it must be a trick. Others said the creature was too weak to show aggression. They refused to believe the human's presence had changed anything. But he knew what he saw. The wolf trusted him, or at least wanted to dot as the days passed. He brought no tools, no equipment, no restraints. Just his presence. Sometimes he didn't say a word. He simply sat there, letting the creature feel that someone was willing to stay with it, not out of fear or duty, but out of genuine concern. Even the harsh sunlight didn't stop him. He sat through heat, cold, and long quiet hours because he understood that building trust with a terrified, suffering animal required more than skill. It required patience no one else was willing to give. And every small step the wolf took toward him proved that patience was working. The aliens still called him foolish. They still insisted he was wasting time. They still stayed far away, refusing to help or even look closely at the creature. But the human didn't need their approval. He only needed the wolf to know that it wasn't alone anymore. What began as a simple act of compassion slowly turned into something far more powerful. A silent conversation between two beings who didn't share a language, but understood each other perfectly. And though the aliens couldn't see it yet, something important had already begun. A connection, a bond, a shift that would soon surprise everyone who once mocked the human for trying. But for now, it was just a man sitting near a suffering creature, refusing to give up on it, even when the whole universe said he should. The sun had barely risen when the human reached the sanctuary again. The air was cool, and a light mist touched the ground as he walked toward the same enclosure he visited every day. Nothing about his steps was rushed. He moved with the peace of someone who already knew what he needed to do. He simply needed to be there. When he arrived, the alien wolf was awake. It lay near the same side of the cage where it had slowly moved in the last days. The creature lifted its head when it sensed the human's footsteps. Its ears twitched, its eyes narrowed for a moment, and then its expression softened, almost as if it remembered him. The aliens who were assigned to watch the enclosure stood far back, talking quietly among themselves. They kept repeating that the wolf was too unstable, too dangerous, too sick to be trusted. They said no human should get near it. Some of them didn't even agree with keeping the creature alive. They believed it was beyond saving God, but the human didn't listen to their comments. He walked to his usual spot near the side of the enclosure and sat down slowly, legs crossed, his hands resting on his knees. Nothing dramatic, nothing bold, just calm, steady presence. The wolf watched him closely. Its breathing was uneven, but the sharp tension that once made its body stiff was slowly fading day by day. The humans at the sanctuary had seen all types of animals react to pain and fear, but there was something different about this creature. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't wild. It was tired, hurting, and confused, yet it paid attention to the human in a way it didn't with anyone else. The human knew the wolf needed more than kindness. It needed help. But before he could touch it, he knew he had to continue building trust. So every day, he took the same approach. He spoke softly, even though he knew the creature didn't understand his words. He described what he was doing, what he was holding, what noises it might hear. He did this not for communication, but to keep his presence predictable. Animals, he knew, feared sudden changes. A consistent voice helped them relax. Sometimes he read reports or repair notes aloud. Sometimes he just talked about the atmosphere outside or how the morning breeze felt. None of it was special, but the wolf listened every single time. By the end of the week, the wolf no longer shrank away when he shifted positions. If he leaned a little closer, the wolf didn't freeze in fear. If he cleared his throat, the creature didn't flinch. These were small things, but to someone who spent years working with frightened animals, these were important signs. One afternoon, the wolf tried to stand again. It placed its front paws forward and attempted to lift its body, but its legs trembled too much. The creature groaned softly and lowered itself back down. It wasn't a growl, not even a warning. It sounded like disappointment, frustration mixed with fatigue. The human felt his chest tighten. He wished he could help it immediately, but he understood that moving too fast would only scare the creature. So he stayed patient. He carefully placed a grooming brush in front of the enclosure, far enough that the wolf wouldn't feel threatened, but close enough for it to notice. The aliens watching from behind the safety wall shook their heads. One of them whispered, "He is foolish. That creature will snap the moment he gets close." Another replied, "Humans are too emotional. They think kindness changes everything." But the human wasn't trying to change everything in a day. He was just trying to show the wolf that he wasn't a threat, that he wasn't there to hurt it like whoever or whatever harmed it before. The wolf stared at the brush for a long time. It didn't move toward it, but it didn't retreat either. This small reaction made the human smile a little. The creature was curious, and curiosity was always a good sign. Later that evening, while the lights dimmed across the sanctuary, the human noticed the wolf lift its head and sniff the air again. It stretched its neck slightly, leaning closer to the bars. The human gently slid his hand forward, not inside. Not too close, just forward enough that the creature could smell him better. The wolf didn't pull back. The aliens watching widened their eyes. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. A creature that had refused every alien handler, a creature they labeled aggressive, dangerous, unpredictable, was allowing a human to sit inches away without panic. The human didn't celebrate. He didn't speak excitedly. He just took a quiet breath and let the moment happen. Every day that followed brought slow, steady progress. One day, the wolf tried to sit up when it heard the human approach. Its legs shook, but it pushed itself up anyway, as if trying to look more alert for him. Another day, it scooted a few inches closer, dragging its weakened body across the floor despite the pain. It didn't reach the bars, but the intention was clear. The human spoke softly to it, praising it gently, even if the wolf didn't understand the words. It understood the tone. Trust was growing. Still, not everyone believed in his methods. Some aliens complained openly, asking why the humans let him continue such a dangerous attempt. They said professional alien handlers should be dealing with the wolf. They said the human was making the process slower, harder, less efficient, but they didn't see the wolf's reactions the same way he did. They saw a dangerous creature. He saw a scared, exhausted one. He wasn't trying to dominate it or force it into obedience. He was trying to connect with it, to let it choose to trust him. One morning, he arrived earlier than usual. When he reached the enclosure, he found the wolf sitting upright, not fully stable, but upright and staring toward the entrance, as if waiting for him. Its ears twitched the moment it saw him, and the corners of its eyes relaxed slightly. It was the first time the wolf showed clear recognition. The human felt a quiet happiness spread in his chest. He sat down, just like always, and the wolf lowered itself onto its stomach, but remained close to the bars. It didn't hide in the corner anymore. This was enough to tell him that the time for the next step was approaching. That evening, after hours of sitting quietly, he slowly lifted the grooming brush again. He held it in his hand this time, letting the soft light shine over its bristles. He didn't move it toward the wolf yet. He simply let the creature look at it. The wolf's eyes followed the brush. Its breathing quickened for a moment, unsure, uneasy. But then its gaze shifted to the human's face, and the fear softened. The human placed the brush down gently and said, in a calm tone, "Not today. Just showing you." He did not rush anything. The aliens watching mumbled among themselves again, confused by his slow approach. But he didn't care. He knew that forcing a scared creature into contact was the fastest way to break trust forever. The next day, he repeated the same action. He showed the brush. He let the wolf smell it. He placed it down again. No sudden movements. Every day, the wolf's reaction grew calmer. One night, as the sanctuary lights dimmed and the sky outside turned a deep shade of blue, the wolf did something unexpected. It crawled forward until its nose almost touched the bars. Its breath hit the air in small puffs, and its eyes stayed locked on the human. The human slowly moved his hand closer, not touching, just close enough that the wolf could sniff his fingers. And the wolf did. For the first time, the creature leaned its head slightly toward him, as if it wanted to understand what he was. The aliens who once mocked him now stood silent. Some looked shocked. Some looked impressed. Some simply had no words at all. The human didn't smile wide or celebrate loudly. He stayed present, calm, steady. He whispered a soft word of comfort, even though the creature didn't understand his language. What mattered was that the wolf felt safe with him. Day after day, the human continued the same routine. Patient presence, soft words, slow movements, no pressure, no force. Little by little, the alien wolf stopped seeing him as a threat. It began to see him as something else, a protector, a helper, a rare being who cared enough to sit for hours beside a frightened creature that everyone else avoided. And though nobody realized it yet, something big was coming, because trust, once formed, can open doors no one believes possible. This was only the beginning of the bond that would soon shock every alien who once called the human foolish for even trying. The morning air was cool and fresh when the human arrived at the sanctuary again. The soft hum of machinery and the occasional call of other animals created a familiar, calm rhythm. He walked to the enclosure at his usual pace, quiet but steady, carrying only a small grooming brush. No equipment, no cages, no harsh tools, nothing that could frighten the creature. When he reached the enclosure, the wolf was awake, lying closer to the front than ever before. Its fur was still clumped, tangled, and dirty, but its eyes looked brighter. They flicked toward him immediately, not in fear, but with recognition. There was a quiet intelligence in them, a silent message that it remembered him and trusted him more than anyone else. The aliens, observing from behind the glass walls of the sanctuary, whispered among themselves. Some shook their heads. "He is still foolish," one said quietly. "That wolf could tear him apart in an instant." Others were less vocal, but equally skeptical. They couldn't understand why the human insisted on sitting beside a creature they called dangerous, diseased, and unpredictable. The human ignored them. He knelt slowly, setting the brush down on the floor a few feet from the wolf. He didn't reach out yet. He didn't want to scare it. Instead, he let his presence speak for itself. He sat quietly, watching the wolf with calm, steady eyes, showing that he meant no harm. For a long moment, the wolf just stared at him. Its breathing was uneven, and its body trembled slightly. But it didn't retreat. It didn't growl. It simply observed, as if weighing the decision to trust this human further. Then, slowly, the wolf lifted its paw and moved it forward, dragging itself a few inches closer. It was unsteady and weak, but it made the effort. The human smiled gently, speaking in a soft, low voice, describing what he was doing in simple words. He didn't need the wolf to understand the words. He only needed it to understand the tone. Comfort, calm, safety, that was what his voice conveyed. Days of patience had taught him one thing: fear could not be rushed. Any sudden move, any unexpected gesture, could undo weeks of careful trust building. And this wolf had endured far too much to risk that. So he stayed calm, slow, predictable. He let the wolf make the first moves. After another long morning of sitting near the enclosure, the wolf inched closer again. Its movements were cautious, measured, almost like testing the waters. The human extended a hand slowly, keeping his palm open and relaxed. The wolf lowered its head slightly, sniffing his fingers from a safe distance. It flinched once when the brush made a soft sound on the floor, but it didn't retreat. This small act, just sniffing, was a monumental step. The human's heart lifted slightly. Weeks of silent effort had brought them to this point. First recognition, then curiosity, and now tentative acceptance. The aliens were silent now. Some even stared with disbelief. They had never seen a creature so feared respond to a human in this way. But he didn't look up at them. Their opinions no longer mattered. What mattered was the bond forming, quietly and steadily, between a man and a suffering, misunderstood animal. Over the next few days, the human repeated the routine. He moved, the brush closer each time, slowly, never forcing contact, always allowing the wolf to choose. He spoke softly, describing what he was doing, what the brush was, what noises it might make. He made no sudden movements. Then, one afternoon, the wolf surprised him. It stretched its head over the bars, brushing its nose gently against the human's fingers. The touch was light, cautious, almost hesitant, but it was the first direct contact. The human froze for a moment, letting the wolf decide the length of interaction. He didn't pull back or push forward. He simply stayed still, letting the creature's trust guide the moment. From that day on, small gestures became more frequent. The wolf would press its head closer to the bars when he approached, sniffing his hands, nudging the brush, even leaning slightly against the human side when he placed his hand through the cage opening, just enough to touch the thick fur. Every gesture was slow, careful, measured, but each one was a sign of growing trust. The human noticed every detail. The wolf's breathing was more regular. Its eyes held more focus. Its ears relaxed instead of flicking back in tension. And, most importantly, it no longer flinched away from his presence. Still, the aliens whispered their doubts. "That wolf is still dangerous," they said. "Any moment, it could attack." But their words were empty. The human had learned to read fear, pain, and trust in ways they never could. He had worked with frightened creatures long enough to know when a movement was curiosity, when it was caution, and when it was aggression. And this was curiosity, tinged with caution, but slowly being replaced by comfort. One evening, the human decided it was time to let the wolf experience grooming in a controlled way. He moved the brush closer, letting it rest against the bars near the wolf. The wolf sniffed it, and then, after a long pause, it nudged the brush gently with its nose. That small motion was enough. The human understood that the wolf was ready for the next step. He spoke softly, encouragingly, letting the wolf know this was safe. Slowly, he began to brush the matted fur from the wolf's neck and shoulders, careful not to hurt it. The creature flinched slightly at first, but it didn't move away. It simply let him continue, almost as if it were testing the human's patience and gentleness. The aliens watching were stunned into silence. They had never seen a creature they considered deadly allow anyone near it, much less permit care. Some whispered that it must be a trick. Others remained quiet, unsure what to make of the situation. The human didn't notice them. He was fully focused on the wolf, feeling the tension in its muscles slowly melt away under careful grooming. He spoke in a soft, continuous tone, explaining what he was doing, not because the wolf understood words, but because the sound of his voice comforted it. Hours passed like this. Every movement was deliberate. Every brush stroke was careful. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the wolf began to relax. Its trembling subsided. Its breathing grew smoother. Its eyes softened, no longer wary, no longer distant. By the end of the session, the wolf was leaning its head against the human's hand, accepting care in a way no one thought possible. It had chosen to trust him completely in that moment. The human leaned back slightly, smiling quietly. He knew. The work was far from over, but the first real breakthrough had occurred. Trust had been earned, patience had been rewarded, and the bond between human and wolf had grown stronger than anyone could have imagined. That night, as the sanctuary lights dimmed, the human sat near the enclosure for a few more minutes, just breathing and observing. The wolf lay closer than before, almost as if it wanted to stay near him even after the session ended. And for the first time, the aliens watching had to admit silently that the human wasn't foolish. He was doing something extraordinary. They didn't fully understand it yet, but the wolf's behavior spoke for itself. It wasn't just fear anymore. It wasn't just survival. It was something more. Connection. Recognition. A bond that would shape everything to come. The human left the enclosure that night, feeling quiet satisfaction. He didn't boast or speak loudly. He knew the most important part was already done. The wolf had chosen him as someone safe, someone who cared, someone he could trust. And in that quiet moment, he realized that the work was no longer just about care. It was about partnership. The wolf had survived countless hardships alone, but now, slowly, it had a companion. Someone who would not abandon it, not judge it, and not fear it. Someone who would stand beside it no matter what. The aliens continued to whisper in disbelief, but the human ignored them. He had learned long ago that fear and doubt could not stop progress. Only patience, consistency, and genuine care could. And for the first time, the wolf allowed him into its world, not as a predator, not as a threat, not as an intruder, but as a friend. That friendship, fragile and quiet at first, would soon become the foundation for something even stronger. A bond no alien skepticism could break, a trust no fear could undo, and a story of compassion that would surprise everyone who had once laughed at the human for daring to care. It was a moment of victory, not just for the human, but for the idea that patience, kindness, and understanding could reach even the most frightened, wounded, and misunderstood creatures. And this was only the beginning. The next morning, the sanctuary was quiet. The sun had not fully risen, and a gentle haze floated over the grounds. The human walked along the familiar path to the wolf's enclosure. He carried no equipment except for a soft brush and a small towel. His steps were slow, careful, and calm, as if every movement mattered. When he reached the enclosure, the wolf was already awake. It was lying closer to the front than before, its eyes bright but still cautious. The creature had grown stronger in the past few days, but its body still trembled when it moved. Every step it took was careful, measured, as if it feared causing itself more pain. The human knelt down in his usual spot, placing the brush gently on the floor near the wolf. He spoke softly in a calm tone, describing what he was doing and what he would do next. The wolf watched him closely, ears twitching, eyes following every movement. The aliens, observing from behind the glass, whispered among themselves again. Some shook their heads, muttering about foolish humans who didn't understand danger. Others stayed silent, clearly shocked at the wolf's growing trust. The human didn't respond to them. He knew this moment was between him and the wolf. No one else mattered. He had learned that patience was everything. For weeks, he had waited for the wolf to choose him. And now, the choice was clear. Slowly, he picked up the brush and held it gently in front of the wolf. The creature sniffed it carefully, its nose brushing against the bristles. Its ears flicked back slightly, but it didn't pull away. The human spoke softly, praising it quietly, letting the sound of his voice comfort the wolf. Then he began to brush the tangles from its fur, starting with the least sensitive areas. The wolf flinched slightly at first, but it didn't move away. Its breathing was uneven, but calmer than before. The human kept his movements slow, deliberate, and careful. Letting the creature set the pace out as he worked, he noticed something new. The wolf wasn't just tolerating the brushing. It was beginning to lean into it. Small movements at first, subtle shifts in its body, like it was allowing itself to relax and trust completely. The human's heart lifted. This was progress, a real tangible change that no alien observer had expected. Hours passed as the human continued. The wolf's body grew steadier, its muscles less tense, and its breathing more regular. The human kept talking, describing his actions, making soft sounds to reassure it. Each brush stroke was gentle, careful, and patient. He never forced the wolf to do anything. He let it guide every step, letting trust grow naturally. The aliens were silent now, watching in disbelief. They had never seen anything like this. A creature that they believed was too dangerous to touch had allowed a human not only near it, but actively grooming it. They whispered to each other, questioning what they had thought they knew about fear, trust, and instinct. Then it happened. The wolf, exhausted but calmer than ever, shifted its head and rested it lightly against the human's hand. Its body trembled slightly, not from fear, but from relief. It let the human continue brushing without resistance. The human froze for a moment, letting the creature decide the length of the contact. He didn't move, didn't speak loudly, and didn't pull back. He simply stayed present. That moment marked a turning point. The wolf had chosen him. It had trusted him enough to allow contact and care. The human understood the significance, but he didn't celebrate loudly. He remained calm, knowing that this trust was fragile and had to be nurtured carefully. Over the next few days, the wolf grew stronger. Its body became steadier, its movements more confident. It began to follow the human's hand with its head, pressing against it slightly, as if asking for more gentle care. Each small gesture was a victory, proof that the bond between them was deepening. One afternoon, while brushing the wolf's back, the human noticed a sudden change in its posture. The creature's ears flattened slightly, and its eyes widened as it looked toward the corner of the enclosure. A mechanical drone, part of the sanctuary's routine maintenance, had malfunctioned and emitted a loud, unexpected noise. The wolf stiffened instantly, ready to react, but it did not attack. Instead, it turned its body slightly, placing itself between the human and the noise. Its stance was cautious, but protective. The human froze, heart pounding, but he didn't move. He understood the gesture immediately. The wolf was shielding him. The aliens watching were stunned. They whispered among themselves in disbelief. "It is protecting the human," one said quietly. "Impossible," another replied. They could not understand that a creature they had considered dangerous and unpredictable had formed such a bond. The human, however, remained calm. He spoke softly to the wolf, letting it know that everything was okay. He moved slowly, reassuring it with his presence and gentle voice. The wolf relaxed slightly, but stayed close, still acting as if ready to protect. After the drone was fixed and the noise stopped, the wolf turned its head back toward the human. Its eyes met his, and in that simple gaze, a silent understanding passed between them. The wolf had chosen him not only for trust and care, but for protection. It had recognized him as someone important, someone worth defending. From that moment on, the relationship changed. The wolf began to follow the human's movements more closely, leaning against him for comfort and guidance. It allowed him to brush deeper tangles, places that were previously too sensitive. Each day brought new progress, new signs of trust and connection. The aliens continued to watch, some in awe, others in quiet disbelief. They had expected danger, aggression, and fear. What they saw instead was compassion, patience, and loyalty. The human had accomplished what they had thought impossible. As days turned into weeks, the human's presence became essential to the wolf's well-being. It would not eat without him nearby, would not move from its resting place unless he was present, and followed his voice whenever he called. The wolf had learned to depend on him, and in turn, he had learned to understand its needs without force or fear. Every small interaction, every brushstroke, every soft word, every moment of stillness built a deeper connection. The wolf, once considered dangerous and untouchable, was now calm, responsive, and even affectionate. It had found safety and companionship in someone who had refused to give up on it. One evening, as the sanctuary grew quiet and the last rays of sunlight filtered through the glass, the wolf rested its head fully on the human's lap. It closed its eyes, breathing steadily, completely relaxed for the first time in its life. The human stroked its fur gently, speaking softly, and for the first time, he felt the wolf's heartbeat against his hand. The aliens observing were silent. Some looked amazed, others thoughtful. They had witnessed a human achieve what their species had deemed impossible. Not just taming a dangerous creature, but forming a bond based on trust, patience, and understanding. The human stayed with the wolf for hours that evening, knowing that this was more than care. This was partnership, a bond built slowly, carefully, and with immense patience. The wolf had chosen him, not out of fear, not out of need alone, but out of trust and understanding. And in that quiet, shared moment, something remarkable happened. The human realized that the wolf's trust was complete. It had become more than a creature in need of care. It had become a companion, a protector, and a friend. No alien words could capture the significance of that bond. No report, no observation, no judgment could explain the depth of connection that had formed through quiet patience and unwavering presence. The human finally stood, carefully brushing the last remaining tangles from the wolf's fur. The creature watched him calmly, tail flicking slightly in what seemed almost like approval. He stepped back, smiling quietly. The work was far from over, but a major milestone had been achieved. The wolf had survived pain, fear, and neglect. The human had shown that compassion, patience, and consistency could reach even the most guarded hearts. And the bond they shared had grown stronger than anyone could have imagined. From that day on, The wolf was no longer just a frightened, suffering creature. It had a guardian, a friend, and a human who would never abandon it. And the human, in turn, had found a companion who would trust him completely, even in the face of fear. The aliens could continue to whisper their doubts, but the truth was clear. A connection had been made that could not be broken. Trust had been earned, patience had been rewarded, and the unlikely friendship between human and wolf had become something extraordinary. This was no longer just about care. This was about partnership, loyalty, and understanding. And it was only the beginning. The morning arrived crisp and quiet at the sanctuary, with only the distant hum of machinery and the occasional call of birds filling the air. The human walked along the familiar path to the wolf's enclosure, carrying only his soft brush and a small towel. His steps were calm, measured, every movement deliberate. He had learned that every detail mattered when working with a creature that had known fear and pain for so long. When he reached the enclosure, the wolf was awake and alert. Its eyes followed him immediately, full of recognition. It did not flinch, did not growl, did not retreat. Instead, it shifted slightly closer to the front, as if greeting him silently, acknowledging his presence. The humans at the sanctuary had watched this progress for weeks, but the aliens who observed from behind the glass still whispered doubts. Some shook their heads, calling him reckless. Others were silent, staring in disbelief. They could not understand the bond that had grown between the human and the wolf, the trust that had been slowly built, day by day. The human knelt in his usual spot and placed the brush gently on the floor near the wolf. He spoke softly, as he always did, describing what he would do, keeping his tone steady and calming. The wolf listened intently, tilting its head, following the sound of his voice. After weeks of patience, the wolf had begun to trust him completely. It allowed him to brush its fur without resistance, even in the most sensitive areas. Its muscles relaxed under his touch, and its breathing was calm. Each session brought subtle improvements. The wolf's movements became stronger, its posture more confident, and its eyes brighter. It was no longer just surviving. It was beginning to recover, physically and emotionally. The human knew that trust alone was not enough. He needed to help the wolf regain its strength, confidence, and independence. So he began to guide its movements, gently, encouraging it to stand, walk, and even stretch its limbs. At first, the wolf was hesitant. Its body was weak, its joints stiff, and every movement was cautious. But the human stayed patient. He never forced it, never rushed it. He simply supported it, letting the wolf move at its own pace. Day by day, the wolf grew stronger. It began to follow the human's voice, responding to his calls with small movements. It would walk toward him when he entered the enclosure, pressing lightly against his side, as if seeking comfort and guidance. The aliens observing this transformation were astonished. They had never seen a creature they considered dangerous allow someone near it, much less follow and trust them so completely. One afternoon, something remarkable happened. A sudden noise erupted from a maintenance drone nearby, a loud metallic clatter that startled the wolf. Its ears flattened, its eyes widened, and it tensed, ready to react. But instead of retreating or attacking, it turned toward the human and positioned itself between him and the noise, standing protectively. Its stance was cautious but firm, a silent promise to shield him from harm. The human froze, heart pounding, and spoke softly, reassuring the wolf that everything was fine. He did not move abruptly or make sudden gestures. He simply stayed calm, letting the wolf understand that he trusted it and that it could trust him in return. Slowly, the wolf relaxed, still standing close, but no longer rigid. Its eyes met his, and in that silent gaze, a deep understanding passed between them. From that moment on, their bond became even stronger. The wolf began to follow the human more closely, pressing against him for comfort and support. It allowed him to brush its fur thoroughly, even in areas that had once been too sensitive. Each day brought new signs of trust and connection. The wolf was no longer just a frightened, injured creature. It was a companion, loyal and attentive, to the human who had chosen to stay beside it when no one else would. The human noticed every detail. The wolf's tail moved more freely, signaling contentment. Its ears relaxed instead of constantly twitching in tension. Its breathing was steady, and its movements were more confident. It had begun to rely on the human, but it was not helpless. Instead, it was learning to trust its own strength again, guided by someone who had shown patience, care, and understanding. The aliens observing this transformation whispered among themselves. Some were in awe, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. Others remained skeptical, convinced that the wolf's loyalty could not last, but the human did not care. He knew that trust, once earned, was far stronger than fear or doubt, and the wolf had chosen him willingly. Over the following weeks, the human continued to challenge the wolf gently. He encouraged it to move more freely, to explore the enclosure, and to interact with the environment. He introduced simple exercises to rebuild its strength, always supporting it when needed, always praising it with calm words and soft gestures. The wolf responded eagerly, showing curiosity and confidence that had been absent for so long. One day, a particularly difficult challenge arose. A new alien animal had been introduced to the sanctuary, a creature similar in size and strength to the wolf. The wolf hesitated, unsure how to react. It growled softly, tense and alert. The human approached calmly, speaking in a soothing tone, letting the wolf know he was there. Slowly, the wolf relaxed, lowering its posture and sniffing the air cautiously. It allowed the other creature to approach, observing without aggression. Guided by the human's steady presence, the aliens watching were stunned. They had expected chaos, conflict, perhaps even an attack. Instead, they witnessed control, patience, and understanding. The human had taught the wolf more than trust. He had taught it calmness, confidence, and the ability to navigate a world that had once terrified it. Another breakthrough came when the wolf began to show affection. It would nuzzle the human gently, press against his side, and even rest its head on his lap during grooming sessions. These small gestures were monumental. They indicated not just trust, but attachment and recognition. The wolf had accepted the human as a companion, someone it could rely on for safety and care. The human, in turn, had learned to read every subtle signal, the slight shift of the wolf's ears, the movement of its tail, the change in its breathing. He understood what each gesture meant and responded appropriately, reinforcing the bond between them. Their connection was no longer one-sided. The wolf communicated with him through actions, and he responded with care, patience, and understanding. The aliens continued to watch in disbelief. They had never seen a human achieve this with a creature they considered dangerous and unpredictable. They could not comprehend how compassion, patience, and understanding could accomplish what fear and force could not. But the human never sought recognition. He never boasted or drew attention to himself. His focus remained entirely on the wolf, ensuring its safety, comfort, and progress. Each day brought new growth, new signs of trust, and new moments of connection. One evening, as the sanctuary lights dimmed, the human and the wolf shared a quiet moment together. The wolf rested its head on his lap, its eyes half closed, breathing steady and calm. The human stroked its fur gently, speaking softly in a rhythm that had become familiar and comforting. In that moment, they both understood that their bond was unbreakable, built through patience, trust, and shared experience. From that day on, the wolf was no longer just an injured, frightened creature. It had found a companion, a protector, and a friend. And the human had found loyalty, trust, and a connection that transcended species. The aliens could continue to doubt, question, or criticize, but the truth was clear. A bond had been formed that could not be broken by fear, skepticism, or disbelief. Trust had been earned, patience had been rewarded, and the unlikely friendship between human and wolf had become something extraordinary. This bond would carry them both forward, shaping their lives and proving that even the most wounded and fearful creatures could find safety, strength, and companionship when met with genuine care and understanding. The human left the enclosure that night with a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the wolf was not only healed but thriving. He had not just cared for a creature in need. He had forged a connection that would last a lifetime. And the wolf, once considered untouchable and dangerous, had chosen him as its guardian, protector, and friend. A sanctuary, the aliens, and even other humans could watch and whisper, but nothing could diminish what had been achieved. Trust had been built, loyalty had been earned, and a friendship had grown stronger than anyone could have imagined. And this was only the beginning.